All right, I'm going to hit start webinar, everyone.
Go for it.
Recording in progress.
To avoid that double feedback with headset on each device.
Welcome, everyone, to the 2022 Virtual Self-Advocacy Summit. We will get started shortly. We just wanted to let everyone in.
And Reina, you want to tell folks how to join in on the Spanish interpretation for the first time?
Sure, not a problem. Primero que nada, bienvenidos a todos a lo que es la cumbre del 2022 de autoabogacía. Ya tenemos la interpretación encendida, así es que para participar en interpretación, si usted está en una computadora, usted va a seleccionar el icono que parece un mundo abajo de su pantalla. Después de que seleccione el icono que parece un mundo, usted va a seleccionar su lenguaje de preferencia, en este caso será español. Y por último, le invitamos a silenciar el audio original. También tenemos interpretación a señas disponible, y si usted está usando un celular o otro tipo de diapositivo, sus opciones van a ser diferentes. Usted va a seleccionar los 3 puntitos en su pantalla que indican more o más opciones. Después de que seleccione los 3 puntitos, usted va a seleccionar su lenguaje de preferencia, va a seleccionar español y por último, una vez más, pone el audio original en silencio y oprima listo para que de esta manera esté lista para participar. Puede someter cualquier pregunta en su lenguaje de preferencia usando la función de QIA. For anybody who is monolingual English only speaking, you will also want to select interpretation today. To select interpretation, if you are using a computer, you will select the icon that looks like a world at the bottom of the screen. If you are on a phone or a tablet, your options are different. You will actually select the 3 little dots that say more, and then you will select English, and this will leave you ready to fully participate and be able to hear any questions or comments that are made in Spanish in real time. With that, everything else would be set and ready to go.
All right, that was great. Thank you. So for the folks who are trickling in right now, welcome everyone to the 2022 Virtual Self-Advocacy Summit.
And then Chloe was going to play her video.
She just pulled it up. All right. Thank you, Chloe. Okay, so welcome everyone again. Reina, if you wouldn't mind, can you please give instructions on how to listen in Spanish one more time?
I'm bringing her back into the room right now, okay?
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Welcome once again. So quick reminder, once again, about interpretation. I will do it in English first this time. If you are joining us and are a monolingual English only speaker, we do invite you to select the interpretation feature. To select interpretation, if you are on a computer, you will select the world-like icon at the bottom of the screen. Once you select the icon, you are going to select English, and this will leave you ready to fully participate and be able to hear our Spanish participants when they do have any questions or comments on an open mic. If you are on a cell phone or a tablet, your options are different. You will actually select the three little dots at the corner or either top right or left-hand corner of your screen. Once you select the three little dots that indicate more, you will want to select language options, hit English, and this will leave you ready to fully participate. Para los que nos están acompañando aquí el día de hoy, que necesitan interpretación en español o que prefieren simplemente escuchar esta reunión en español, ya hemos encendido la función de interpretación. Si usted está usando una computadora, usted va a seleccionar el icono que parece un mundo abajo de su pantalla. Después de que seleccione el icono que parece un mundo, va a seleccionar español. Le invitamos a poner el audio original en silencio, que es la última función justo abajo de hablar a señas, y después esto le permitirá estar en modo de interpretación. Si usted está usando un celular o una tableta o otro tipo de diapositivo, sus opciones van a ser diferentes. Usted va a seleccionar los tres puntitos que están abajo de su pantalla. Después de seleccionar los tres puntitos que dicen more o más, usted va a deslizar un poquito hacia arriba, va a seleccionar interpretación del lenguaje o language interpretation. Después de que usted haga eso, va a seleccionar español y por último, y después va a poner en silencio el audio original y por último va a oprimir listo para que esto le permita tener la función encendida. Le invitamos a someter cualquier pregunta o comentario que usted tenga usando la función de QIA, que son preguntas y respuestas, y de esta manera nosotros estaremos aquí para asistir. Gracias.
Thank you, Reina. Appreciate you very much. Okay, so welcome again, everyone, to the 2022 Self-Advocacy Summit for Youth and Young Adults with Disabilities. This summit is brought to you by Resources for Independence Central Valley, EPU Childrens Center, Central Valley Regional Center, and the State Council on Developmental Disabilities, Sequoia office. We welcome you to day 2 of this week-long advocacy journey, where you will learn new skills to add to your toolbox and have the opportunity to receive valuable information at the virtual resource fair. The information for the virtual resource fair has been sent out to the email that you registered with, and we encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to mingle during the sessions today and Thursday with organizations that are here to support you. We would also like to thank the team at EPU for hosting the Zoom webinar platform today, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Service Center for providing ASL interpreters for this event, and Healthy House Merced for their Spanish interpretation services. A few housekeeping items. The first one is the chat box has been disabled. If you have questions or comments, please pop them into the Q&A. If you need to voice your question or comment, please raise your hand and you will be called on when it is appropriate. Live captioning has been enabled for your convenience. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today, here to bring you to a presentation on the right to an accessible education is Tasha Perkins, Fresno State student. Tasha, take it away.
Hello. Again, my name is Tasha. I am a student at Fresno State, a graduate student at Fresno State, and finishing up my degree in clinical rehabilitation and mental health. Try to share my screen. Okay. You guys can see that?
Yes. So Tasha has started screen sharing her presentation.
Mine again is on advocacy and the importance of it through education. I wanted to focus on, a few topics such as disability and education, types of advocacy, and then the challenges of advocacy and the importance of advocacy. Some background on me. I do have 3 children. My eldest child does have ADHD, and he was diagnosed with bipolar 2. I am biracial, so I have different experiences with different dynamics of not only my own education, but also my child's education, as far as being able to get different accommodations throughout the course of his education as well as mine. I started school in 2014. So I was an older student, and I started from the very bottom of getting a certificate program and trying to go through the motions of the AS degree, AAS with the transfer, my undergraduate, and now my master's degree. And every dynamic that I went to essentially had ups and downs and challenges with trying to get the accommodations that I needed for each school that I went to. The goal of this presentation is to understand that every person with a disability deserves an opportunity for adequate accommodations and equal access among general society within our education system. The ADA, basically, you learn this a lot when you're going through the school systems and the education system. What the law says, what we have access to, and essentially what the schools are willing to do, they don't always line up. They may offer services, but they don't offer customized services. Private schools and charter schools, unless there isn't a school within a 50-mile radius, they don't have to comply with ADA. You go to a public school. So ADA really consists more of like rights and our accommodations for public schooling because they get state funding. We are getting, reasonable accommodations, and the reasonable accommodations I learned in my junior college years that it really pertains to what the school interprets as reasonable. So is it reasonable if one student needs a specific accommodation versus we're going to give them a global accommodation? So I am hard of hearing. I'm not deaf. The schools would offer ASL interpreters. I don't sign. So which is it reasonable? they offered an accommodation, but it wasn't adequate to my needs. It wasn't specified to my needs, but they still can push that. He was in that gray area of a reasonable accommodation, those kinds of scenarios. So again, with me, I have bilateral hearing loss in clarity over sound. So I wear double hearing aids, and I use a contact listening device as well as in-room captionists that help me kind of function in the classroom. There's a difference between my kind of accommodation and a cart service accommodation, which is digital and remote, versus having an in-person captionist, because I need speech to text versus overall. So the conversation gets lost in interpretation as dialect continues. So in order for me to follow lectures and classroom instructions, I need in-room captioning that types word for word. When I started my education, they used the AM/FM system that had a lot of glitches and a lot of issues with clarity. The on-screen stuff was pretty much non-existent. It was all amplification. We're just going to make it louder for her. We didn't have a lot of understanding of how my hearing issues and accommodations needed to kind of work with each other. And also came down to who was going to pay for it. A lot of schools did not want to pay for it. I attended 5 colleges throughout my education so far, and each one was a struggle to get accommodations off the ground. Whether the school already had their own accommodations in place or they had to order new equipment. Again, it came down to money and who was going to pay for it. College of Sequoias, when I started there, they initially didn't even have a touch tone system. They had nothing in captioning. They had nothing in written. So we had to learn how to put all these different accommodations in place for students that were hard of hearing, not necessarily deaf, but hard of hearing. And I learned that those accommodations were non-existent for the time being. Each college I attended simply refused to accommodate me. So I had to have countless meetings and learning about my disability and how to educate other people about my disability, and getting them to understand that hearing aids are essentially a tool. They're not a cure. And even though it amplified the sound, it didn't do anything for the clarity. So when you have to go that route and trying to get them to understand that dynamic, it took the interpreter from COS to come and kind of shadow me and see how I functioned in the classroom. And she also got a view of how my accommodations worked in the classroom, which we couldn't hear anything. And the captionists were very inaccurate because they couldn't hear anything online and they were in other states. So we saw she was able to see the struggle firsthand, and we were able to accommodate accordingly based off of that. So I met with the dean of students and my counselor and SSD, and I had gotten an advocate for deaf or hard of hearing in Visalia who was deaf. So we needed a captionist or an ASL interpreter for her as well, to work with her so we can have this meeting to kind of understand, okay, what can we need? And it was trying different equipment out, trying different scenarios, a note taker. I didn't need a note taker because if I could hear it, I had no problem taking my notes. Also, a note taker, again, does nothing for the fact that I needed speech to text. I was still missing what was going on in the classroom. The types of advocacy I've had to learn was you either advocate for yourself or you're going to advocate for someone else. In my case, I was doing both because I had a child who had mental health issues, and needed different accommodations, such as a 504 and an IEP plan to carry him throughout his high school education. And I needed physical equipment to carry me through my college education. So learning how to advocate in those different dynamics is essential of how you're going to be able to function in classroom settings. When I transferred to Fresno State, again, they were not prepared for me, even though I did my best to explain to the school that I was coming. This is what I deal with when I get there. This is what I was expecting. When I met with the counselor at Fresno State, he basically was like, we got a CART system and we have an AM/FM system and we have captionists. They weren't my captionists, and I don't use the AM/FM system. I don't need a note taker. And this is what I use now, and I need this to carry over from my junior college to my university. To which was a little bit different. I had to learn things like SSD, which is Students with Disabilities, DOR, Department of Rehabilitation, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services in Fresno, and then the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Advocates. Also, each school has their own ADA department that you work with as well. So I had to learn how to utilize all these entities to help me advocate on behalf of me. Fresno State, we had an issue with understanding and comprehension and inclusion. I carried a heavy load. Sometimes I had 21 units a semester. I had ridiculous amounts of units because I was just simply trying to finish. I needed my captionist to work in the capacity of that. In criminology, we use extensive particular vocabulary, and she needed that vocabulary to instill in her word bank. I needed her precision and her accuracy to be close to 95%, if not higher. And when I met with the captionists from Fresno State, they couldn't do that. Or at least they weren't used to working in that capacity and in that speed as I am with my captionists. We had to have countless meetings. College of Sequoia actually let me keep the equipment until Fresno State can order the exact equipment, because now College of Sequoia was offering that equipment as part of their SSD services. So they wanted their equipment back. So, and we had to advocate and have meetings and understand to bring my private captionist on board, who was contracted through Deaf and Hard of Hearing to provide services for me. In a classroom setting, I have to sit in the front. There's a handicap table, and one captionist sits to my right and the other sits to my left, and I'm in the middle. So we have a lot of equipment. There's 3 screens going. On top of the professors are using an isolated mic that connects to my T-coils. So in my hearing aids, I only hear the professor speaking. And again, it came down to who was going to pay for that. So the advocate did a lot of her job with just trying to understand accessibility. It wasn't that it was my preference to have my own captionist. It was a necessity for me, in order for me to actually function in the classroom, for me to be included in the classroom. So challenges with the fight. There is a resistance in advocating for yourself. You think the people that they put in place to help, like students with disabilities, or special administrators who work with people that have disabilities. And actually, they're still trying to balance that money out. So they kind of push back the hardest. It's been my experience, is where they're the most difficult people I have to work with. A lot of times when you come across the educational system, they want to its services try to fit everybody. It's not custom, it's not individualized, it's everybody. We're gonna offer this one service for everybody. Having a hearing disability is a little more expensive than having a physical alignment, from what I found out. But there are schools that get specialized funding for certain hearing disabilities as well. So again, it's about that research and understanding your disability and what you actually need and how do you put that in place into your advocacy and your meetings and your education. The other big thing is discouraged. You get very discouraged when you're trying to make people understand where you're coming from, when you're battling these professors and teachers and administrators, and you just want to be included, and they're not intentionally excluding you, but they're not going out of the way to include you. You feel a lot of depression and rejection because you are isolated. Disabilities in a college setting is very isolating. Even though we have an SSD department, a lot of times when you are struggling with trying to fit into this world that is, people are still learning a lot about themselves and the ages vary up and down, you kind of close in a little bit. You feel hopelessness, as in like, you're never gonna get this done, therefore your education's done, and you have to kind of fight those kind of negative thoughts. You also feel like you're unworthy of an education. Like, well, if everybody else is saying I simply can't do this because it's too much work to accommodate, then maybe that's true. Making your outlook on your future kind of dim. Most of the time we are just trying to get independence, if not be treated the same. We understand our disabilities. We know we have them. We live with them day in and day out. But when other people put that in the focal point and make you feel like you can't simply because of your disability, it plays a little psychological game with you a little bit. So COVID, when we moved into the world of COVID, that changed the whole dynamic. So after the undergrad fight with getting my captionist on board, the ComTech device, and the equipment and everything that we needed for in classroom, COVID changed the dynamic, everything. We were no longer in classroom. The only alternative I was given for my accommodations was to basically drop. And we'll pick up when we can figure out how to accommodate. Yeah, I'm not doing that. So we tried to move into SSD to do captioning. We've had to use multiple screens to figure out how we get the captionist on there. The captionist had to get multiple screens. We had to play our video and try to explain, okay, well, this is what we do in the classroom, but we're not in classrooms, but we still all around the gist of her hard of hearing and her accommodations is there. And how we kind of run in the classroom. Waiting, now we gotta have professors wait, 5 or 10 minutes to make sure the captionist is good to go and that we're not having glitches and that I can hear them. Then it became, well, the Zoom has captionings. Why can't you use the Zoom captionings? Zoom captionings can work okay, but they're not as accurate and they do have glitches and they're not designed for classroom conversation. So Angie and Michelle, who are my captionists, they're designed, or they work in the capacity of, they understand to pick up conversation. So even when two students are having a dialect, they can pick that up. If a professor and a student are talking, they can pick that up. Where these cart services or robot services aren't really able to do that. So that was the other struggle with understanding that we had to move to online. The ComTech is not going to be an option right now, but we still had to use captioning services and have the professor understand that I'm hard of hearing. So if you start without me, without the captionist logging on, I will not hear what's going on. So why is it important to advocate? well, access. All classrooms should be accessible, regardless if it's we need to move tables around to get a wheelchair in my case, have extra equipment put in. It's whatever access is needed for students with disabilities to be included in that classroom. Equality, we have the same rights as everyone else, especially when it comes to education. And it should not be in the capacity of separate but equal, because as I learned, trying to give me separate work in the same capacity doesn't necessarily mean it's equal. A lot of the times that they try to accommodate my work, or if I had a video that wasn't captioned, they would give me another video. Most of the time it was racially charged or motivated, and the class would have nothing to do with that. So again, those kinds of things where it's unfair, and it's a lot of unnecessary in the same capacity of trying to accommodate, but they're really not. And then change without the voices, without the advocacy, there can't be modifications. We can't change things if people don't know how to change them. And education, we can't educate people on variations of hearing. If everybody has the same concept that if you're hard of hearing, we're all deaf, then ASL interpretation is going to work great for everybody. No, those things are always moving. Even ASL, there is lip readers who do not sign, and they are completely deaf. So those kinds of capacities. And we always strive, of course, to change the attitudes and behaviors, as well as stigmas towards disability that comes through advocating and educating people when those times seem appropriate. So in summary, every battle that I did throughout my years of schooling has been with the goal of finishing my education. And there has been so many ups and downs throughout college, and there was many times where I wanted to quit because it seems hard, it's exhausting. You get tired of going against that grain, of having to come into each semester and having to explain the same scenario repeatedly, having to put in accommodations, having to put in times for captionists, having to work with people who question why you have hours or why do you need this captioning service. And it's like, you know, you've been in the same entity for 5 years. When are you going to get it? But, you know, again, I keep that focus of I'm trying to finish. I'm trying to accomplish my own goals. And I am trying to make that journey for the next person after me a little bit easier, where if they come across another student that does have specified hard of hearing issues, they know how to accommodate that a little bit better, where they don't have to spend half the semester having meetings with administrators and ADA, and you're trying to just go to class and you got to stress out about if you're going to be able to hear what's going on in that classroom. So it's ultimately it is to just make that journey a little bit easier for the next ones after me. And then, of course, my references was Department of Rehab, American Disability Association, and Deaf and Hard of Hearing in Fresno. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tasha. And we also had some questions while you were presenting. So the first question that we got was, where did you get an advocate? And I mean, I don't know if I'm going to answer this for you, Tasha, but
I could tell.
okay.
It depends on who. I had two. For deaf and hard of hearing in Visalia, I got one from there, and then I got the second deaf and hard of hearing advocate from deaf and hard of hearing in Fresno. The ones in Visalia, she was deaf, so she signed. So I had to get another interpreter for her, and then the one in Fresno, she signed and she also spoke. So.
Okay. And then another comment was, this helps a lot understanding more that someone's suffering. So they are loving your story, Tasha, and we appreciate you coming here and sharing it. Does anyone have any more questions for Tasha or comments?
Whitney?
Someone said, how do you get a mental health advocate?
So that's the fun part with clinical rehabilitation and mental health, which me and Jordan are in. And me and Jordan are actually in two separate capacities. Jordan is in clinical, she's in rehab counseling, which she deals with the disability. I do mental health counseling, which deals with the mental health. And you'll get that from Erica, who's on after me. They're separate. They don't really collide with each other. So if you do need mental health services, you do have to reach out to an entity that does mental health. So your mental health and your disabilities are going to always be two different things. You will not have a counselor that does both because they're not allowed to.
Great question. Someone said, thank you for your story. Thank you for sharing your struggles.
Okay, can you share the information on the Fresno office for the deaf and hard of hearing services?
Yes.
Okay. And then the answer to Whitney, Lisa?
Yeah. We answered Lisa. She said that she wanted the contact information. Lisa, if you email me, I'm going to type and answer my email. I can give you their information.
Yeah, so when you go into deaf or hard of hearing, everybody signs, even the receptionist, and then they'll give you they'll meet with either the director or the coordinator, and they'll help you with what kind of advocacy you essentially need. At this point, I'm with the deaf or hard of hearing just for my interpretation services, which my captionists are contracted with them, but the advocacy part's kind of already, I haven't moved schools, so it does settle. It's a challenge at the beginning, but it does settle as you move faster. And the biggest struggle is just not to give up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So someone said, do you have an email that they can reach out to you? And then another person asked for your contact information.
Jordan has that on
Okay.
my Fresno State
Okay.
email. And also the schools are different. So your advocacy is coming through your school issues. So if you have a child that needs to go to school and they need different accommodations, your 504s and your IEPs, those are different for social workers. In college settings, you're adults, so we don't really have social workers. So that's where the advocates kind of come into place. So in a school setting, if they're not complying or they don't want to work with the accommodation that you need, that's where the advocates kind of come in and work with those social workers to help the schools understand, okay, this is what we need. So we had to put in a lot of behavior modifications for my son that struggled with mental health. Otherwise, they were just trying to put him in a special needs school. There's nothing wrong with him intellectually, it was all behavior, but the school wasn't designed for that. And they kept pushing back with, we can't accommodate. But so the advocates came in and we actually worked through what we actually needed to put in place, which was minimal modifications to him being able to leave like the classroom if he had an issue or if he was off meds or stuff like that. So again, there's details in there where the schools need to be able to hammer them out. You as the advocate need to be able to explain it fully and then pass the law on it. What does the law actually say?
And then Whitney asked, when did you find out about your disability?
I always, when I was 16, I knew I had a moderate hearing loss. And then by the time I was 30, it was moderate to severe. And then now it's severe to profound hearing loss. So it's been a while, but the school setting was a little bit different. I tried college right out of high school, and I realized that when I was sitting in the classrooms, I couldn't hear anything. So I essentially just kind of dropped out twice and did the life thing. And then when I returned with half shell hearing aids, which were not great. It just made everything exceedingly louder. So again, it was another trying to figure out, okay, what kind of hearing aids do I need to work with my hearing and to be in a classroom setting? So I have 4 different sets of hearing aids. There's digital, there's RICs, there's half shells. I'm too old for a collinear. So that wasn't going to work out. So it depends on my situation. I have to modify the hearing aid to work better. And of course, I have the ones that work with my ComTech device.
Mhm. And then another question, do you know what caused your hearing loss?
From what I gathered, my mom drank. So there's a slight possibility that it was fetal alcohol syndrome. Also, they only came with the conclusion that it was nerve damage. And you go through an ENT and you do an audiogram and all those things. So there's nothing wrong with the actual ear itself. So they came to that receiver being damaged inside my ear.
And then Lisa, I see that you're raising your hand, but you also have typed stuff into the chat. So we prefer you use the Q&A, but if you prefer to use your voice, I can allow you to speak if that's what you're needing. Okay, so I'm going to allow you to speak. And then Lisa, whenever, okay, go for it. Hi, Lisa, do you have a question? Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. So somebody also asked, what services would you recommend for a dependent adult with disabilities?
It depends on what kind of services they're going for. So again, all your entities are different services. Even disabilities in itself require advocacy sometimes. So if they're going to school, what kind of services are they going to need to be in a classroom setting? If they're going to work, what kind of accommodations are they going to need in a work setting? If they're trying to just get more services, what kind of services are they going to need when it comes to their accommodations? And a lot of times, if you're trying to get that information across, you have to know your own information very, very well. I always had to go back and explain what severe hearing loss is and how to read an audiogram. So, and they give you this decimal and a bar to where it shows the levels of your hearing, and mine were all underneath it. And if you see the stuff on the bottom, that's how I hear, and that means I don't have good hearing. So explaining those kinds of things to people is the best way to go about it. Customizing it to that specific entity, because it may not, I can use a ComTech at school, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to work for me in sessions with clients.
Mm-hmm.
Type deal.
And then Brenda, you were asking about what services would we recommend for a dependent adult with disabilities as far as support goes? And I would recommend RACV for you to either contact the youth department, myself or Aubrey, or if you would like to contact somebody else, but maybe for an adult, we can provide you with services as far as support goes. And then let's see, I think I have 2 more questions. Oh, somebody said thank you. Yeah, we have lots of thank yous. So thank you very much, Tasha. We appreciate you coming and telling us your story and being willing to have other people contact you for more questions also. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. All right, so Aubrey, you can go ahead and launch that first poll.
All right, I'm going to launch that poll right about now. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, most of the people have participated. I'm just gonna give you guys another 30, 45 seconds. All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, so before we move on to our next guest speaker, we're going to have a quick PSA break with Anthem. So I would like to thank Anthem on behalf of RACV, EPU, CVRC, and SCDD for their generous donation of items for the care packages. So here to represent Anthem is Mi Cha.
Hi, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say something. Anyway, I'm with Anthem Blue Cross Medi-Cal, and if anyone has any questions or anything about our program, you are welcome to ask or message me, and I will be available at 3:30 to 5:30 for any questions about our services.
Perfect. Thank you, Mi. And then if I sent out the email this morning, so you should have the links to all the different participant virtual booths as well. So thank you, Mi. We appreciate you. And
Thank you.
also, I would like to take this time to thank Linguistics A-Team for their interpretation. I apologize earlier, I said the wrong name. So again, thank you, Tasha. And up next, we have Erica Estes. She is the Workability ED, and here she is going to present about advocacy in the workplace.
Hello. Hopefully I'm available. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I was trying to share a video of myself, but I guess it's not going to come up. That's okay. So I am Erica Ananian Estes, the Executive Director of Workability 4 at California State University, Fresno, and I'm pleased to present Advocacy in the Workplace. So a little bit about me to provide some validity to why they asked me to speak about this. I have my master's in rehabilitation counseling, and I've been the executive director of Workability 4 for 16 years and an adjunct professor at Fresno State, where I teach psychosocial aspects of disability, advanced job placement, and internship. And I love what I do every day, and I love the population I work with. So, what is advocacy in the workplace? According to masterclass staff, it's taking the initiative to communicate your needs and wants to others to support your overall well-being by advocating for yourself, okay? And I got to thinking about advocacy, and it's not just about disclosing a disability, but I identified some other areas I'd like to talk about as well. So one being disclosure of disability. Next being asking for accommodations, for reasonable accommodations. 3, which came up with a consumer disclosure of medication use for a drug test. It can be allowing your job coach or your employment specialist to advocate on your behalf if you're having trouble, and maybe navigating difficulty with a coworker. So these are the areas I'd like to address when we're talking about advocacy in the workplace. Okay. So Montez explains that if you're not clear on what you want, it's harder to advocate for yourself and ask others to speak in your absence. So what you should know before you proceed to advocate are thoroughly understanding your disability. So it's extremely important that you understand the intricacies of your disability. And the Job Accommodation Network helps put words to some of those things, while other operational definitions may not apply to you. But it's still equally as important that you take the time to break down and understand your disability. Number 2, know your strengths. Knowing your strengths is so important. You need to know what you're good at and to sift through things that you might, excuse me, let me start over. So knowing your strengths is important. On the next page, I'm going to go over how you can highlight your strengths. So some individuals can highlight them really well, while others need some help. So we'll go over that as well. Number 3, understanding the manager's expectations. So this is really important that you look over the duty statement of the position, the job description, and proceed with the meeting by then asking for your manager to break down expectations that are assumed but not in writing, because sometimes there's gray areas, and be sure to take notes so that you thoroughly understand all that is asked of you. 4, it's important that you're able to verbalize what you want so it makes sense to all parties involved. And when you do the above recommendations, that will really help you put some words to what you need. And 5, keeping it professional. This is super, super important. By being prepared, right, is really important, but separating emotion from fact and practice with a job coach, an employment specialist, any agency you feel comfortable with, or a friend, to ensure that you're accurately communicating your needs with the right tone of voice and body language. So all of these areas are really, really important that you go over each of them and understand them well before you try to advocate for yourself. This will definitely help you. Okay, so we talked about knowing your strengths. And I said, some people know them very well and don't need any assistance. More often than not, I have consumers ask for assistance. And so sometimes if we don't choose an assessment, we really look at their work experience and we have them reflect on education, and we ask, what do you like to do? What makes you feel good when you're doing it? Or what have you gotten any positive feedback? And we try to highlight some of the areas that the individual has strengths, because those are definitely going to be applied to what you're going to do. I've highlighted some other assessments that will help to get you help with your strengths. So there's interest inventories, personality inventories, skills, values. Some of these are free and can be assessed just with these websites. Others, if you go to universities, you have access. I know just recently I took the 5 free strengths, which I found to be very insightful and accurate. So it's really important that you take the time to know your strengths and know a little bit about yourself so you can accurately look through the duties to see what you're going to be good at and areas you might need assistance in. Okay. Disclosure of disability. So the most common question we at Workability hear are, should I disclose? And if so, when should I disclose? And to be honest, there's no right answer. It's very individual to the person and the circumstance. So we really have to consider, is the disability visible or invisible? Okay. If the disability is visible, then we recommend bringing it up in the interview. Maybe when the question, tell me about yourself, is posed at the beginning, we recommend that you bring it up as an asset to the position. We feel that it might squash any questions that the interviewers might have, or might distract them from hearing how you qualify for the position. We have had several of our consumers choose to disclose in their interview, and it went really well for them. So again, each situation is different and different for the individual. If our students are not comfortable, then we don't advise to, but we can practice and we ask. So if the disability is invisible, okay, a few questions. Will you need accommodations in the interview? That's one. So obviously, if you need accommodations for the interview, then definitely you need to disclose. Second, will you need accommodations for the job? So sometimes I have individuals that want to disclose, but they don't need any accommodations. So we really iron through what would be the advantage of disclosing and what would be the disadvantage of disclosing. So for those that need accommodations, we recommend that the individual disclose when they're offered the position, okay? And we have some students say, well, I feel like I'm not being honest. And really it has to do with if you qualify for the position. So think of people without disabilities. They do not tell all their intricacies of their life. Same with disability. Unless you're going to need an accommodation, the individuals do not need to know that information. That's your private personal information, okay? And again, there's many different situations with different people. So this is not an answer for everyone, but kind of a generalized what we recommend, okay? Asking for reasonable accommodations. Okay. If you're going to ask for reasonable accommodations, it's extremely important that you look over the duty statement carefully and highlight areas that you may have difficulty with. So be sure to reference the Job Accommodation Network to see what type of accommodations they recommend. You can look under your disability, or you can look under the duties. Sometimes you don't even have to ask for an accommodation, but it's a minor change that you can make for yourself. So we've had individuals that have trouble getting to places on time or losing track of their calendar and forgetting stuff. So we really coached that individual on how to calendar over and over and over again. And then we were able to get a smartwatch, which would vibrate to let them know, hey, in one day, you will have to do this. And then, hey, in 10 minutes, you will have to do this. So there's some types of accommodations where you don't ask, you don't have to ask. And there's others where you can ask. Another example is we had an individual that had a mental health disability and he took medication. He did not feel that he needed to disclose for the job because he was able to do all of the duties without accommodations. However, he had one concern. From time to time, he had to change his medication. And so he posed to the employer that his doctor has prescribed him a new medication. He didn't go into the details of what the medication was, and he needed to take a few days off to adjust to it. Or there's the other option of just taking a couple of sick days and accommodating that way. Or if you do want to disclose, you can let the employer know. We've had a consumer also disclose that they had a mental health disability. They didn't per se give specifics, but they said it can impact work in these areas. And so they highlighted areas like maybe coming into work late from time to time. And so we've used all of the various types of accommodations. And again, it's case by case, but they've worked for us with practice and communication, okay? So disclosure of medication, we had this one come up recently. So one of our consumers was offered a job contingent that they pass the drug test. And I'm just saying this for those of you that don't know, when you go to a drug testing facility, all you have to do is give the name and the dosage of your medication. You don't have to bring your pill bottle in. You can if you want, but everything is kept confidential. So they do not disclose the information to the employer, but they have to, when they're testing, sift out some of the components that are in the medication. So just wanted to provide that information. One of our consumers did not disclose, and so we had to coach her through calling the testing center and making sure, hey, I forgot to mention I'm taking this medication. And so she was really concerned that it was going to come up with her employer, and it ended up just fine. We were able to communicate in the right amount of time. But that is your right to share your medication, and that's private. Okay, another issue, not an issue, but if you choose, like if you're in a situation where you are working with a job coach or an employment specialist and you want them to advocate on your behalf, it's really, really important that you have an open conversation about their interaction. So you can ask them, I would like you, or tell them, I would like you to share this information, but not this information. You can have an interactive discussion because the coach or the specialist can break down like what the meeting might entail, and you can map it all out together. The important thing to know is that you're in control of the conversation and you're in control of what is allowed to be shared. So if there is a situation where you want your coach or specialist to advocate on your behalf, these are really important conversations to have so that you can advocate even for yourself with your employment specialist and your coach. Here's my references. I also wanted to mention like navigating difficulties with an employee. So how would you advocate if you had a problem with a coworker? We had to work with an individual the other day that was, his coworker kept interrupting him, and she was extremely rude. And so we talked with the consumer to see what they were comfortable with. And initially, our consumer went and talked with the employer. And so usually the rule of thumb is you address a concern with the coworker first, professionally. Then you go to your manager if that is not resolved between the two of you. And we really practiced how to stay professional, even if emotions are heightened. And we mapped out a plan. So it's really important that if you're having trouble in the workplace with an employee, that you don't shove it in the corner until something big happens, but you advocate for yourself by being professional. And there's many different agencies out there that can help with that. So I encourage that you always practice and advocate for yourself, even if you have difficulties with a coworker. So that's it for advocacy in the workplace. Does anyone have questions?
Thank you, Erica. Yes, we do have a few questions in the Q&A that have come up. We have Brenda, who asked, I have PTSD and sometimes I get panic attacks at work. Should I have my psychiatrist request for accommodation, such as lay down more breaks?
Okay. Well, my question would be to Brenda, do you need more breaks?
And we have one more. She might respond, but as of right now, she hasn't.
So for Brenda, if she needs more breaks, then, okay, she put yes, but I
Feels embarrassed.
Okay. I don't think it's anything to be embarrassed about. And sometimes, depending on the job, like if it's at a desk, you can take little breaks yourself. So I'm not sure of the intricacies of your job, but if you don't want to disclose and you can take a little like 5-minute break, put headphones on and listen to some relaxing music to help, I would definitely do that. But if you're not allowed those breaks, I think it's very healthy then to contact human resources, disclose. But again, I don't know all the details of your circumstance, so I'm just going based on the data that you've presented to me. And you can just even say like, I need a few breaks. It's 5 minutes. I don't know how often, but again, okay, remember, know the intricacies of your duties and what you want as a victim advocate. Okay, so if you're a victim advocate and you have your own office, then you can definitely like take a few minutes to turn the computer off, just unplug and breathe through the panic attacks. I don't know how bad they get because it's different for different people, but I would try that if you really don't want to disclose. If that doesn't work for you, then you might want to disclose.
All right, and the other question we had was, can we get contact info for any questions that we can ask you?
Contact info for specific questions. I haven't thought that one through. I don't mind helping, but trying to keep my ethical. I suppose I can field a couple of questions again, like with our consumers, we work with them almost every week, so we know all of the intricacies of what is happening in employment and of their disability. So I can talk with you and maybe get you connected with services where you can have that type of support, because it is out there. And it's important. If you want to be supported in that way, I think you should seek services. So I will try to connect you or whoever needs it with the services. For workability, you have to be obtaining a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate, or at Fresno State, you have to be a consumer of Department of Rehab.
Awesome. If anyone has any more questions, please put them in the Q&A now. Or if you would like to ask aloud, please feel free to use the raise hand feature.
I've also provided a handout. So if you might contact Jordan, that has all of the links to the assessments, if you would like those.
That would be wonderful. We did have a question. Whitney asked, how often do drug tests happen?
How often?
I would think that would be up to the employer, but
Yeah, it would be like based on what type of work. Some employers in their job description include that they drug test periodically. Some it's just, if you pass the drug test, then you are gonna get the job. It's a condition of the hiring process. So it just depends on the specifics of the job.
all right. I think that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Erica. I'm going to go ahead and launch the second poll. So please feel free to participate. And launching poll now.
And while everyone is taking this poll, I want to thank Tasha and Erica for their time, and especially for making me look good, because I brought two really good guest speakers today. So I appreciate that. Okay, we have about 76% participation right now. Okay, I think that that is enough time for the poll.
All right, take it away, Jordan.
Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. I know that we kind of finished a little bit early today. As a reminder, please join in on the second sessions of the virtual resource fair happening today from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. So if you get that email that I sent you, there are various links for different booths that you can visit. To close us out today, I'm going to hand it back over to Chloe, and she's going to give us a Chloe's Care Corner tip for the day.
Hi guys, so my Chloe's Care Corner tip for today is to make sure that you stay cool and you know, be inside if you can, be in an air conditioning environment because it is really hot, especially this summer and this week. So make sure you're doing all that you can to stay cool and yeah, and to take care of yourself through that, because it's a really just a really hot summer this summer. So yeah, that is it, and that is all. Thank you so much, and have a great day, guys.